We're going to start this afternoon by talking about fashion licensing, how you drive growth both locally, globally, in India and internationally. And to start the session, I'd like to call Maura Regan, Executive Vice President of the International Licensing Industry Merchandisers Association. Maura?
All right. Hi, everybody. Everyone had a great lunch. It's all back. So anyhow, well, thank you so much, really, to India Fashion Forum for extending an invitation, and certainly to Mr. Manasvis for inviting me to come and speak about licensing at this. I'm very, very pleased to be here. I was here yesterday and really excited and thrilled to be part of some of these discussions. And really, what's happening in the fashion industry is what we're seeing happen globally with the fashion industry, not just specific to India. So I'm particularly delighted to be here at this program because really the convergence of intelligence, design, retail, and technology is an ideal platform for the business of licensing. And today's panel in particular, which is driving growth in India and driving growth locally, is also the perfect platform for licensing. I'm a bit biased. I'm the Executive Vice President of the International Licensing Industry Merchandisers Association, a really long name, known as LIMA. No, we're not in Peru, and no, I'm not a bean, but that is an acronym for the International Licensing Industry. And we are the trade association that represents globally the licensing industry. We're in more than 120 countries, with boots on the ground in 14 of those countries. We have 1,200 corporate members worldwide representing all the big names in brand licensing, from Disney to Ford Motors to the NFL Players Association, and really everything in between. And the reason why I'm so strong and bullish on the licensing industry is because it is a growth industry. Year over year, it demonstrates growth across industries worldwide. Last year, the global brand licensing delivered more than $264 billion US dollars worldwide. Out of that, the fashion licensing industry is approximately 13%, with a demonstrated 4% year-over-year growth. So you can see that there's a tremendous opportunity worldwide, and specifically for India, around the fashion industry. So I'm particularly excited about this industry because I see it as an opportunity to drive growth locally in countries as well as on a global brand. And really, yesterday and today, there was a lot of discussion around how to drive growth, how to engage consumers, and obviously and ultimately to drive revenue for all of our business partners. And it's particularly, I think, useful when thinking about a growth strategy for your business to understand and to recognize the value proposition of brand licensing as a business model. There's not, I'd say, a less risky way to get into differentiating your product category to the consumer than brand licensing. You are investing into something at a very low risk level with someone who's spent many, many years developing a brand, and so it's less arduous for you to enter that market that way. And what we do know is that market capitalization for public companies is largely driven, 30% of it is driven by brand recognition. So today, more than ever, based on market cap or the value of your company, combined with the challenges between online and offline to differentiate your product, your category, brands are the way to go. And there's nothing that can deliver a stronger message to the consumer than a smart brand extension through brand licensing. And fashion in particularly is really taking advantage of this. And so what we're seeing in the world of fashion licensing is that all of the majors, and so whether it's Tommy Hilfiger that we see today, Kate Spade, Calvin Klein was one of the early early adopters in the industry of brand licensing to go into brand extensions. All of these companies are doing smart licensing and delivering strong revenue to their bottom line and to their core businesses through the business model of licensing. Some of the other trends that we're seeing across the board in licensing particularly is, again, what we're seeing across the board in all of fashion, which is the fashion at the push of a button, as I like to think about it, which means you go from online to offline to online. And again, looking at how the consumer is making decisions, it's all driven by a brand decision, and that's largely driven by brand licensing. Another big trend that we're also seeing is what I call follow the thread, which means that we want to look good, we want to feel good, and we want to do good. So it's understanding where the garment or the product is made, what the fair labor practices are involved with that. Consumers want to know from start to finish that what they're consuming and what they're buying and purchasing and wearing is where it's coming from, because ultimately it's a statement about who they are. And this is a consistent theme that we're seeing, particularly in the fashion industry. Fashion as an expression of a lifestyle and a particular tribe or group that you may belong to, in terms of how we look at it in terms of demographics. Fast fashion, I think fast fashion, say that quickly, is really less a trend and more just the way of life these days. But again, it's cycling through that we're seeing even at the luxury fashion level. We've trained the consumer to expect something new and something different. And that's why what we're seeing is fashion and even high fashion going into collaborations. And we have someone on the panel later from Disney who can certainly speak to this. But if you look at the terrific collaborations that Gucci did with Major League Baseball, or Coach with Keith Haring, or even Victoria Beckham with Target. We've got a colleague here from Target as well. These are all really smart collaborations that drive excitement and engagement at the consumer level and is additive and doesn't in any way compromise either of the brands that have come together. So what we're seeing consistently is an experience that the consumer is looking for that is about engagement, excitement at the retail level, a quality product, and something that they can also feel good about. And I today am here to say that the way to get there, the way to connect with your consumer and your customer ultimately is through smart brand licensing. And without further ado, I'll pass this on to my colleague, Jiggy George, who's here today. And Jiggy actually has done us a terrific favor in many ways and is actually now representing LIMA locally here on the ground, in addition to his work, which is with Dream Theater, which is really taking up most of his time. But I pressed upon him, and he is actively engaged in proselytizing about the value of licensing to all the business units here today. So, Jiggy, come on up. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I am not going to make introductions, so please do come up on stage, and then we'll keep it very informal, and we'll start with asking possibly individual questions, and then look at topics in which everybody could get involved from a licensing point of view. We've got every part of licensing very, very well represented. We've got licensors. Just for the benefit, we'll be using the word licensor, licensees often, so just want to demystify what that is all about. Licensor essentially is the owner of a brand, and licensee is the person who leases the ownership of this brand. It could be a retailer, it could be a license, it could be a retailer, it could be a licensee. And when we talk about licensee, it could be somebody who has the ability to create great product or to distribute, or both. So we have got it very well represented from the licensor world, the licensee world, legal, and retailer. Firstly, we are at a very interesting phase with licensing in India. I keep saying it, out of the 3 tick marks that are important for this industry to grow, exponentially. Two of those tick marks actually work in India phenomenally well. Number one is that we have a consuming class. Our niches are large. Second is that, especially if you look at entertainment, right? The barriers from an entertainment point of view, from just as much as $350, you could get a plethora of channels. People in India are traveling much more. They have access to brands. They know more about brands. They know more about all of the things which most of my colleagues in the other parts of the world struggle with. So a brand and the understanding of the brand is there in India. The third stuff is not really intersecting is retail. So our organized retail is still exceptionally small. There's been great disruption from a perspective of e-commerce, and e-commerce has given consumers a chance for them to actually take that desire to the next level of consumption. But when you look at offline retail, it's still growing, but it's not growing as fast as we guys in the world of licensing would like to see it. But it's just a matter of time because we started from a small base, and it's a matter of time before licensing really takes off and explodes. Without further ado, I'm going to just start throwing some of the questions to the panelists. We'll keep it as informal as possible. Please feel free to add in with any of the questions which are asked to any one specific person. I'll start straight with you, Sanjeet, from Disney's point of view. We all are great consumers of your content. I mean, the content is phenomenal. It happens. Franchises are being built. There are movies every year. Why is the #1 entertainment licensing company in the world so obsessed with fashion? And what I mean is that why do you push the envelope so much on fashion through collaborations and all the things that you do in the West and also in India?
Okay, thanks, Jiggy. And that's a great question because, fashion is one of our lead categories, not just in India, but globally as well. And, if I were to attribute the success of the Disney brand in the fashion segment, it's actually, it boils down to two major factors. If you look at, and just to give you all a backdrop before I give you the two factors is, fashion, for the last few decades has been moving from just product design to storytelling, right? And that's where Disney fits in so wonderfully because at the heart of what Disney is, it has the ability to tell stories, just the fact that a Cinderella shoe is not a shoe, but there is a story behind it is really the testimony of what we do really with consumer products. So I think the two aspects that make our fashion play really, really strong is one is storytelling and the other is product design. On storytelling again, we've got two aspects that I'd like to touch upon that we see as major trends. The first one is there is a movement that we see, and to Maura's point, there's a movement that a lot of high fashion luxury brands downwards, everyone's making, and the movement is from making an elitist statement towards pop culture. So the first part where Disney has a really, really strong play is in pop culture, right? With, brands like, with all our 4 brands, whether it's Mickey Mouse, whether it's Darth Vader, whether it's, Captain America, Avengers, whatever, everything is seeped in pop culture. And that gives us a fantastic into what fashion brands are looking to communicate through their products today. Even locally, if you see, on Mickey, we've done some really cool, quirky collections with youth brands like Only, Jack and Jones, Cooves. And then, just to sort of push the envelope there on this one, we've also done saris with Mickey, with Satyapal. So that just shows the width of how pop culture can really sort of transcend product categories, and not just product categories, how it can resonate locally as well. So that's one part. The other part that we see on storytelling is trending content.
Yep.
Right? And that's a key aspect where, theatricals is a perfect example of trending content. I mean, Disney has 42 movies in 36 months. In India, we've been, making each movie count and make that as a special event. For the last, Star Wars movie, we had over 40 collaborations. And that's only going to get bigger and bigger. So that's really what's happening on the storytelling part. The two factors that we feel contribute towards our fashion play. On the product design, again, I think there are two major attributes, and I'll quickly sort of talk through it. One is, I think, at the heart of our consumer products business, Disney really understands art from the screen onto product. And just the way we render our art is one aspect, but the great part is because we have a fashion play across all age categories, if you take the example of Mickey, there are different art styles for each product, for each age group. So there's an infant Mickey, kids, teen, youth, and adult. And that's how it really resonates on product. The second one is, which is really, really important, is Disney is always trend first. So we juxtapose character and trend. Whether it's a WGSN trend or the trend boards of the retailer or the brand, we try to integrate that trend into the consumer. So those I would say, these four sort of large ones are really how we look at our fashion play.
And storytelling, Nicolas and the Smiley Company. It's very interesting from a pure story perspective. We feel it all the time in India, right, where you open a newspaper and you only see sad news. And his father started off by drawing a smiley in front of every happy news that he ever saw. And from there, they've created something which is a brand which is recognized in 100 countries and licensed in 100 countries. I have two questions for you. One is it a character brand? Is it a fashion brand? And second is, how has it been so successful around the world from a fashion perspective?
So, hello everybody. So, is it a fashion brand or is it a character brand? We are first and foremost a fashion brand. We're not a character brand because we're not a character. Smiley is not in a cartoon. Smiley is not in a movie. Smiley is not the character of a video game.
Yep.
So even though the logo itself has the features of a character, it is still not a character. The same way the Lacoste crocodile is not a character. It's the crocodile of a brand. What makes it a fashion brand is simply my drive as the CEO of the business and as the visionary for the company, and my decision to make it one day a fashion brand. My father didn't start it as a fashion brand. As you say, it was a newspaper promotion. It was about spreading happiness. And when I took over the business, I could have decided to make Smiley into a character and to do a cartoon or to do a video game and to then license this in other categories. My decision was to make it a fashion brand because I had a fashion background, because it's something I'm really passionate about. And I've structured all our studio in London to think about fashion. I surrounded myself with fashion people. Currently, the head of our fashion division was one of the creative directors of Puma. And I'm surrounded by fashion designers and fashion product developers, and we have a very, very strong fashion culture in the company, and my marketing team, it's people who also were working with fashion brands. So this is what is driving the business day to day. And the other question was, sorry? How's it
Been a success around the world? And that's specifically to do with the fact that it's a fashion brand. It's so when you license it to someone, a retailer, a licensee, what do they actually get, which has obviously worked in all these countries, right?
Yeah, so what is licensing? I mean, the way I see it, sometimes people talk about, are you selling me a license? I'm buying a license. It's not a sell and buy model. A licensing is a partnership. It's a partnership between a licensor and a licensee. Each side is bringing something to the table. As a licensor, we bring a turnkey history, brand value, knowledge of our IP, of course, legal protection, marketing. We bring everything that is in the realm of the ideas. And then the licensee is bringing they are the serious people, the licensees. They own retailers, they own factories, they have product developers, they do the financing, they have the logistics. And so really it's a wedding between the idea people, which are us, and the serious people who are the licensees, and each one is bringing something onto the table. So that's really what it is. And so what we bring as Smiley, if you think about it, the logo is only a consequence of what the brand is. The brand is much more than just the logo. And what we bring to our partners is what I was describing just before. It's the story, it's the passion, it's the creative people, it's the knowledge, it's the history. It is everything you can get from an existing licensee. If I give you an example, taking a different brand than mine, if you think about denim, if you license the Lee Cooper brand, you license more than 100 years of history from a brand that means denim, that has researched, that has developed a strong history of denim. It's not the same as creating your own denim brand. You can create your denim brand and be successful, definitely. But if you have Lee Cooper, you have something that is much more strong in terms of authenticity. And today, I think the consumers are really looking for authenticity, and this is why there is you get this authenticity from fashion brands, from denim brands, from big studios like Disney, who have the authenticity and they have the culture. So yeah, I could say that culture is a good word. What you're getting from a licensor is a culture. It's a subculture that they are offering you.
Right. Before I jump into the retailers, because that's where our entire I'm saying our, but I'm saying that in terms of licensing, everything comes back to the validation of the retailers, whether they think this value proposition works or not, this storytelling works or not, right? But before I come there, I just want to speak for a second on Arvind Mills, right? It's a perfect example of a company which has most of the capabilities as a retailer. You could create your own product. You create ground up brands of your own. And you also do a fair amount of licensing. What is the value proposition that is really required, or what you think is the tick marks required for a license to work, really?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think on behalf of Arvind, I think what I would say is that first, there are the strengths of the brand, which they bring to the table. And there is the strength of Arvind to take the brand forward into the distribution in India and build the brand at a profit. So I think the brand proposition has to be fairly strong. How successful have they been globally? Yeah. How they have marketed the brand? What's the kind of customers they've targeted and segmented? And who are these customers? That we need to understand very clearly. And what is the kind of marketing spends that these brands would do to build the brand? While we might spend, but I think they would create the assets for us to take that forward into the country. We would localize it. I think the Arvind has the strength in terms of specialty manufacturing of products. It has the economies of scale to deliver a price. It has the strength to distribute it and build the brand across the length and breadth of the country, along with the other brands that we build in India. So I think it's a place where bringing the brand strength and combining it with the strength of the local partner in the country to build the brand together.
Rajesh, do you want to add on to this? Because this value proposition, right, it's very important to know, because when it comes to characters and brands which amplify by way of entertainment, that's different. But in the case of pure fashion brands, how do you, as a retailer, validate, does it work, does it not work?
So
for us, especially, e-commerce, we're reaching far more customers. So one of the things is we clearly figure out, is there a white space, first of all, okay? And everything that we do in terms of private brands or even in terms of licensing is to look at, what is the proposition and what is the consumers, right? We put the consumer at the center and we try to figure that out, saying that are there likely brands first in the space itself? And whether they be in India or globally, we first try and figure that out as a partnership model. And only post that do we actually see, is there any consideration to build? And when we look at brands, we figure out what are the aspiration sets. Very, very important to figure this out right now, because most of our investments are on a period of 3 to 5 years, right? Just like what Vivek mentioned, how is the brand strong? How does it actually connect to the consumers? We can actually create a huge base of customers for which it actually is very strong in terms of a proposition. But is the proposition itself very strong? I think we spend inordinate time in terms of trying to understand that, keeping the consumer right at the center and saying that, what is it? And the third part that we actually look at is, what is the scale? Are we actually looking at, right? Because is it really going to, because the Myntra today has almost 30 million customers on site every month. Those are the active customers. Now within that, you have only a certain amount of, let's say, retail property or visible site when you guys download the app. Now within that, how does this brand actually fill up the gaps in terms of what consumers are actually searching for or what consumers aspire? If it ticks some of these boxes, and it is a long-term proposition which over a period of 3 to 4 years, you could actually build, a profitable and a very high-scale kind of brand, then it's a tick mark for us. That's the way we would look at it.
And what about you, Girish, what about in offline retail, right? The online guys always say data is being thrown at them, and as a result of which, and the data is based on search results, etc. But you guys are the guys who are taking a lot of gut calls, right, on what works, what doesn't work. How do you even evaluate that? Because you do ground-up brands again, as well as do licensing as a model. What's the evaluation?
The advantage in offline retail is that you're talking to a customer directly. You're not talking to a screen. You're not talking to a number. So you can engage with a customer for 10 hours a day, all through the stores, and each customer is telling you a new story. Each customer is talking about their dreams, their aspirations, their needs. So if Disney is creating a beautiful story, they're creating a beautiful dream, that storytelling has to translate into the offline store. And that's where we come in. And Shoppers Stop has been partnering with multiple licensors across various levels, with private brands, with Disney, with celebrity brands. We have Rezon with Sonam Kapoor and Rhea. We have Flaunt with Femina. So across multiple levels, we are engaging with celebrity and licensors. Now, what this storytelling means to us is, let me just take the example of Disney. So if they created a beautiful story with, say, Mickey. Now, a child has connected with Mickey. A child dreams with Mickey, and they want to now own a piece of that dream, a piece of that magic. That's where the retailer steps in. And the retailers can therefore give the child a piece of that magic across various categories. It need not be apparel, it need not be fashion. It can move across the entire store. It can move across a plethora of categories we have.
No, Girish, but specifically on a question related, it's a no-brainer when it comes to things like Disney, just based on the fact that the amount of storytelling, the amount of content that's thrown at you, and the marketing muscle, right? But how would, like some of your competitor retailers, most consumers in India don't know UCLA is a university. Most people think it's a fashion brand. Most people, for example, how would you take a punt on a Smiley, or take a punt on a UCLA, or take a punt like Arvind that works with Oxford University?
So while we are constantly talking to customers, we are hearing what they're saying. we are hearing what they're asking for. And that translates into our experience in terms of our learning of what they want. And we quickly round up all that learning, not just from customers at the stores, but from all the partners, the thousands of partners we work with. Each one is talking about what's trending, what's happening immediately at this point of time. So we take that, and that forms the gut feel, of course, backed up by experience of what works, what doesn't work, what categories work, what categories don't work. So this gut feel, I think, translates very well into what actually happens on the floor. And the gut feel comes from what people are saying on the floor. So category like Smiley, for example, a lot of stuff is happening today. All of us use Smileys at least once a day on our smartphones. Now, we want to associate with that mood, and you want to say that, yes, I want to be a part of that kind of a smiley thing which he spoke about. So to put a product on the floor associated with that, a customer comes and says, oh, hey, I didn't expect to see it here, but I like it. This is what I believe in. So they pick it up. So I think generating this gut feel is very difficult, but the more we speak to customers, it's easier it gets to latch on to what's working right now, what's trending right now.
Sure. Shweta, I'm just going to ask you something, because when I applied for the first time to get to the US, the guy on the counter turned around and said, if you're doing licensing, have you done law? And I was like, is that my dad? But since everything we do is based on law and legal contracts and what have you, what does it take, when you look at international brands and licensing them into India, are there any conceivable issues that you would see or challenges that you see which needs to be ever highlighted to any of the potential licensees?
Sure, Jiggy. So I think as I was listening to all the panelists speak, fellow panelists talk about what is at the heart of it from a global perspective, one thing that I would want to restate is that what Maura started with at the beginning, that we are living in an omni-channel retail era where the consumer is extremely aware and knows perhaps exactly what is it that they are looking for and the associations that they want to make when they are picking up a product. Given that, there is also a lot of pressure on retailers today to continuously keep innovating and putting the best in front of customers in their respective segments or given their business model. What licensing then helps you do at the most basic level is to help with that innovation and being able to put that value in front of your customer at a very, very low risk. So the licensee does stand to benefit here because some of the initial investments, the stake in the goodwill is not something which is entirely upon the licensee. Sure. What that means then is that from the licensor's perspective, it is very important that when you're looking at licensing your brand, which you have built with a lot of effort over the years, and there is a certain halo effect around that brand, you are in the least matching the philosophy of your brand with the licensee's overall philosophy, because the consumer is very clear in its mind. When they look at a particular makeup product on the shelves of a retail giant or an offline store, for example, they know this is the kind of quality that the store stands for, and probably that is what it is reflective of overall. So to start with, the philosophy when you are actually going ahead and licensing a brand that you've built carefully over the years, what is the brand protection that you're looking for your brand? Because it's a difficult, India especially is a difficult territory to do business in when it comes to trademark protection, copyrights, etc. And it's very easy for brands to also make not the most optimal associations to start with and therefore kind of suffer a setback. when they are licensing. So carefully choosing your partners, laying down everything that is required from a commercial perspective into writing, what is the expectation from the brand, what are the usage rights, what is the term, what are the restrictions, if any, because you at the end of the day would not want your brand to be associated with one thing and everything. There is perhaps a specific purpose and association that you're looking for your brand in terms of visibility.
Yep.
So those are some of the most basic things that I would recommend watching out for. But at the heart of it is the philosophy of your brand and how well it aligns with the licensee's philosophy.
Thank you. In the interest of time, there are two burning questions which I had, and put yourself out there, the owners of the brands, right? There is this great urge for a lot of people now, whether when we talk to licensees, they want to build their own brands versus licensing brands. I'm not even talking about which is better, which is not, either or. Why should you license the brand? Nicolas and Sanjeet, I think.
And that's a great question. And I think, I don't think there has to be a either or. If you look at, if you just look at the character licensing space, right? There are, in India, because it's such a nascent market, there are broadly two approaches that are available for partners, right? And we all know that in fashion, there is a huge movement towards private label right now. So the two broad options that are available is either the retailer or the brand can create Disney as a separate line and branded Disney, or
a part of
that proposition can fit into their private label. The crux, and I want to just touch upon what you mentioned earlier on UCLA or whatever. I think the crux of licensing is anything that you license out, at that local level, there has to be some conversation around that brand or that subject. I don't think you got to reinvent, and that's what a lot of people go wrong, is licensing for the sake of licensing is not it. You've got to have a proposition that is relevant locally. It's not about getting the latest tech packs is one of the reasons why you want to do licensing. That's not it. The brand should resonate, and that has to translate into two things. Either you get a stronger sell-through, or you can take a higher gross margin.
Sure. Nicolas, you want to just talk about the advantage of licensing?
Yes.
Because, just because, Nicolas, most private labels also have WGSM. Everybody knows trends in India. So what is the big advantage?
What is the big advantage of? I think I covered it earlier when I was explaining the example of Lee Cooper. What you get when you license a brand like Lee Cooper, and I think it's the same with a lot of brands. It has to do with the culture of these brands. If you can develop a streetwear brand, and I think there is space for everything. There is space for licensed brands. There is space for Western brands. There is space for local brands. There is space for Japanese brands. So it's not either or. But then when it comes to the licensing side, of course, when you license a brand, you license a certain culture. You license, if you want to do streetwear is very, very linked to music movements like hip hop, which is it's an American subculture, or rock and roll, or grunge. These are subcultures that come from the United States or from Europe. So the people who live and breathe these brands, they are born with them. They understand these cultures. They will always be one step forward because it's who they are. And so I believe strongly that if you work with a brand that has a strong culture, you're going to get a much bigger advantage than if you try to figure out yourself the same sort of things. You're just going to try to copy something that's been originated by someone. So it has to do with the authenticity.
Sure.
I would say that's the main thing.
What about the retailers and Vivek and Rajesh, and what do you all think in terms of this private label and trying to build your own brands versus licensing? Would you?
No, first, at Myntra, we're not in a rush to build our private label business. What we always look at is, as I said, the white gaps. the consumers, and look at what is the scale. And it's only post which we look at all partnerships, and if something doesn't fit in, that we actually look at saying that let's bring something in or create something ground up. At the same time, we've actually had very good licensing and very unique models that we look at partnering, right? Harvard is one where the university varsity kind of thing came in. We just spoke about that in terms of what will happen to campus. That's a very young client base that would be there. Sportswear, we have HRX, which is another brand, which is celebrity. Western wear, we have All About You. So we continuously keep looking at opportunities which are there and then try to build that out, especially when we say that, hey, it's driving conversations, just like what Sanjeet said. I think if it does that, it actually ticks some of the boxes, right? What about you, Girish?
Well, I think that with this, keeping the beauty business in mind and keeping Sephora in mind, I think licensing brands is a great opportunity in India. As we all know, most malls in India are underpenetrated. Most brands in India are underpenetrated. And I think modern trade today is only 10%. So there is a great opportunity of 90% waiting for you. So I think licensing is a great opportunity. These are aspirational brands which people would look forward to. And I think that would be the way forward from a beauty perspective. Yeah, but yeah, private brands have their own advantage. They could play more in the mass and value segments. And because it all depends upon the kind of pricing that you would offer, the kind of packaging that you would offer, the kind of product that you would offer. I think all that would make a difference. And I think the expectation would be that a great product, great price, great packaging, and a great promotional activity behind it. But I think the licensee brands, I think they already have a certain demand in the global market. People are aspiring to buy them, and I think if they are available and presented well to the customer, they have a great future.
In the interest of time, I got to say that this is the end of the session, but thank you very, very much for being part of this. It was so well represented from all parts of licensing, and it was a good way to end with a great level of hope that the industry is just about at the cusp of growth. Thank you very much for attending, and all the best.